You're watching ChillyBoy Productions. I'm Larry ChillyBoy Chilson, and this is my ranking of every animated film of 2022 that I saw. Now, before we get into this ranking, make sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button down below so that you can chill with me on each and every one of my latest videos. So here we are at the end of yet another film year, and of course, we're going to talk about all of the amazing animation that was released throughout the year. If you've been along for the ride, you know every single December I rank all of the animated films I've seen throughout the year, and 2022 certainly brought a lot of animation to both the big and the small screens when it comes to film. 2022 also brought a lot of hybrids. We had a ton of animated films that were hard to judge and determine because they blended live action with animation so often this past year. And ultimately, I decided to use the criteria of intention when it came to these films. Marcel the Shell with shoes on qualified for the Oscar because even a lot of the set pieces we saw that looked live action were actually recreated in animation. Yes, a lot of that, including car dashboards and aspects of the house itself. Whenever Marcel was around, they were stop motion recreations. I also chose to include films such as Chippendale Rescue Ranger because the animated characters in that film are explicitly meant to be animation. They are animated people, beings in this world, much like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And that comes in high contrast to something like Sonic the Hedgehog 2, in which Sonic isn't supposed to be animated, really. He's meant to be an alien hedgehog that just landed on planet Earth. Or something like Avatar, which is quite in the veins of, live action Lion King, where the whole world basically is more or less animated, but the actors behind it are doing stop motion and it's meant to feel like an actual world and not something that was created. It's meant to be more lived in. Ultimately, that left me with 18 films to include here on the list from the animated films I watched in 2022. Now, there are some notable films that won't be featured here on this list. Probably most notably are films such as Bob's Burgers, the movie. I've never even watched an episode of the show, so I didn't watch the film. I'm sorry. Or Luck. I don't have Apple TV Plus, so didn't really have access to watch it. I think 18 is a pretty solid number. I'm satisfied with the list I have. So let's cut out all this preamble chit chat and jump into my ranking of the 2022 animated films. Kicking off with number 18, aka my least favorite animated film of the year, we have Paws of Fury, The Legend of Hank. This cat and dog spoof version of Blazing Saddles just didn't really work for me. If I'm being honest, Blazing Saddles was not one of those iconic comedies I love. It's just not the kind of comedy style for me. And, well, this spoof didn't do it either. The characters aren't very likable. Animation is just okay. The story obviously is what it is. Worst of all, it's not funny, like at all. So for a spoof, yeah, no, that's the biggest sin it could commit. Whole lot of cringe, not a lot of laugh, and that's why Paws of Fury comes in dead last. At number 17, I have Hotel Transylvania Transformania. The fourth film in the Hotel Transylvania series has arrived, this time without Adam Sandler as our lead voice. And I think they did an okay job in replacing Adam Sandler. And the film's message and heart of family is solid enough. The big problem, once again, I just didn't laugh like at all. I did not find this funny. I found a lot of the animation to be a bit off putting, actually, more so even than in previous installations. And I've enjoyed the Hotel Transylvania films for what they were. This is easily the weakest of the bunch for me. Honestly, I kind of just forgot about it. immediately after watching. At number 16, I have Scrooge, A Christmas Carol. Another film that is pretty darn forgettable. Yeah, we have yet another retelling of the classic Dickens A Christmas Carol story. And, well, this one does almost nothing to stand out amongst the crowd. Olivia Colman is amazing here, though. I absolutely adored her rendition of Past. I also think that Luke Evans was a strong Scrooge. Unfortunately, the animation was just okay to me. Some of the stylistic choices were actually kind of off putting, and the songs just weren't good, weren't needed, and distracted from the overall film. We can toss this in the mountain of forgettable Christmas stories. Doubt this will be making it on very many people's annual holiday watch list. Certainly not mine. Bouncing in at number 15, I have Minions The Rise of Gru. While I believe this is actually a step up from the first Minions film, and honestly, a step up from Despicable Me 3, certainly, I still was just underwhelmed by this Minions sequel. First of all, it's not really a Minions film. There's still very much side characters to Gru. But the story is quite pedestrian. It has a little bit of heart in it, but it's again just this big mishmash of different tales being told. That seems to be the big problem in these recent Despicable Me franchise films. They just can't decide on a story to tell, so they mash up all these different elements together. There are a few laughs here and there, but it's just not all that funny. It doesn't have enough heart to carry it, and it certainly doesn't have enough story to make it any further up on this list. Flying in at number 14, I have DC League of Super Pets. Yet another very forgettable animated film in 2022. Unfortunately, we do have quite a few that fall in that category, and DC League of Super Pets kind of just fits the mold of completely middle of the road. It was there, I saw it, I thought it was fine, and I never really thought about it until I had to make these lists. The Rock and Kevin Hart return to give fine voice performances. Thankfully, Kate McKinnon is here to liven the show up in her villain, but everything else about this is formulaic. It's a superhero film like every other superhero film we've seen. It's an origin story like all the rest, just this time with little pets. Once again, it's just not funny. That's the problem with so many of these bottom tier animated films this year. They're supposed to be funny and fun, and they're not. Truly, middle of the road, forgettable. That's why DC Super Pets is down at 14. Jamming its way in at number 13, I have Intergalactic. So there's so much about Intergalactic that I do love, namely the animation style. It kind of utilizes a rotoscope style of animation where we're really just kind of taking the real life people and adding the animation over the top of them. But it's so much more stylized than that. It adds so many fresh elements and layers to its animation that make it feel fresh and continue to push the envelope and art style of what we can accomplish. I also think as an album tie-in for Kid Cudi, it worked really well because the music is blended into the film and into the story very well. And I love having animated films that are pretty much squarely aimed at adults. This is not family fare here. Fortunately, well, I didn't know it was a romance headed in. And romance didn't really hook me in. It's billed as a romantic comedy, but again, I personally didn't laugh all that much, so I kind of viewed it more as just kind of a romantic, maybe dramedy, but yeah. And also, I don't know, I didn't find the romance and the story itself all that engaging. Part of that is because I'm just not cool enough. I didn't have cool experiences. as a 20 something year old, and maybe I just can't relate. Maybe I'm envious. The Dell is beesh over here, but I just didn't fully engage with the story itself. And that's what really kept Intergalactic from moving up any further on this list. For as much as I appreciated so much of it visually, the story was just lacking. Blasting off at number 12, I have Apollo 10 and a half, A Space Age Childhood. So Richard Linklater is one of those famed directors that film Twitter and cinephiles alike absolutely adore, who, over half of the time just doesn't do anything for me. Sorry. And this film kind of sums up all of it for me. What he does so well and what he doesn't do so well for me, and why I find it difficult to really engage in his filmmaking style. Much like Intergalactic, we utilize a very rotoscope style animation here where we have just people's faces and we're working over the top of them in the animation process. We have an all-star cast, actually, but the voice acting actually is pretty fantastic in this film. And I actually enjoy most of the story here. It's just a look back at a time gone by. Another director giving us kind of a fantasized version of their growing up, which seems to be a norm right now. Directors are really feeling nostalgic, huh? But this one definitely takes place outside of his own world and gives us a much more fantastical version of his childhood. And I appreciated that. I actually liked the slice of life bits a lot more than I liked the whole astronaut aspect. And that's where the film really started to drag for me when we transitioned back into the whole astronaut program, this kid's viewing of it and his own fantasy of it. It started to really drag on too long, and the back and forth there didn't work so well for me. It doesn't have any plot, really, at all. You're literally just living with this family, like you do almost every single Richard Linklater film. And it made it all feel a little bit long, even though it only clocks in at just over an hour, 30 minutes. I came out of the film feeling like this would have been a great short film, but as a feature length, it just wasn't able to keep my interest the entire time. But there were moments I genuinely loved, and that's why it is ranked above these others on my personal list. Coming in at number 11, I have Wendell and Wild. If you know me, you know that I absolutely adore stop motion animation. It is an art form I heavily champion. It feels like each and every year begging people to go and support these films so that we can continue to receive stop motion animation. It's such a beautiful art form that is so difficult to pull off. One director who continually pulls off some pretty great stop motion animated film, well, it's Henry Selick, and he finally returns for the first time in over a decade with Wendell and Wild. So I was so excited for this. And much like the last couple on my list, there are parts of this I absolutely adore. Yes, stop motion animation is fantastic. The creature and character designs are all wonderfully weird and fantastical in that Henry Selick kind of way. And I loved the overall messaging with our main character as she works to overcome her past, face her trauma, and become a better person. And I thought that that was actually handled really well. Actually, everything that has to do with the human side of things worked pretty well for me. It's our title characters that I found myself not really liking, and it was that sub story that I was checking my watch during. Anytime we went back with Wendell and Wild in the afterlife and their entire backstory, I couldn't care less. I wasn't attached to those characters at all and just wanted to get back to the human world. The score is great, the animation is beautiful, but the story is just a bit jumbled to make this one of those special films I was hoping for from Selick. Racing in at number 10, I have The Bad Guys. Ooh, I know this is going to be a controversial placement because so many absolutely adored The Bad Guys. It's kind of a new DreamWorks classic for many folks out there. And I know a lot of you would rank it above a lot of these films I have coming up. But for me, Bad Guys was fine. It was fun. It was good. The animation is absolutely stunning from DreamWorks. I'll say this, if for nothing else, DreamWorks really pushed the envelope when it came to animation in 2022. Easily the most innovative of the studios creating animation this year. And the bad guys kicked that off by blending so many different styles and dimensions in this film. It was absolutely gorgeous to watch. And there are fun gags when it comes to the bad guys. There is a fun aspect to it. Unfortunately, I just found the story itself to be rather pedestrian and way too safe for a film about the bad guys. I didn't have quite as much fun as I was hoping to have with this one, and that really knocked it down a couple pegs and kept it from moving any higher up on my personal list. So I'm glad you all absolutely loved it. I had a good enough time with it, enough so that I bought it for Black Friday, but it's not making its way up this rank any further than 10th. Touching down in the number 9 position, I have Lightyear. Oh, Lightyear. What is there to say what is there to say about Lightyear at this point? Well, we all know the animation is just breathtaking. I mean, this movie looked perfect, in all honesty. But Lightyear really suffered from that same fate as so many of these middle portion animated films. It was pretty forgettable. There's some great themes in here. There's obviously that stunning animation, and the cat stole the show. He brought all the laughs. Actually, there were quite a few laughs to be had, but the cat definitely brought the most. Fortunately, the adventure is just so forgettable and so pedestrian. Much as the film tried, it just didn't have heart enough to uplift like so many of the best Pixar films do. And I honestly left Lightyear feeling pretty apathetic. It was a beautiful spectacle to watch, a confusing idea right from the get go that was only made more confusing when you watch the film in context and try to relate it back to the Toy Story films it's a spin off of. I enjoyed Lightyear. I thought it was solid, but ultimately it just left me feeling too cold to really move it up any further than ninth. At number 8, I have Strange World. I feel I actually enjoyed this film more than a lot of people did. Really, I think that boils down to the fact that I just think it's a fun adventure. I think it's a good action adventure flick that provides a fun world to explore with a fun message by the end of it, with a fun new look at an environmental message by the end of it all. Of course, we had amazing representation that was really effortlessly woven into the film itself without ever feeling like it wanted brownie points for it. It just was, which was really, really refreshing from Disney in particular. Hell, the marketing didn't even touch on the LGBTQ aspect of this film. Once again, the animation is stunning and the world building was so much fun. I'm a sucker for world building and I'm a sucker for a good animal centered environmental message. Unfortunately, it just stuffs too much in. It's too much. And that's what bogs the film down. If they had just cut down some of the messaging and some of the ideas and streamlined this into the fun action adventure it was, I actually think Strange World would have been a lot of fun. Not to mention Splat, amazing. One of my favorite characters in animation for the year. But as it is, Strange World is a huge step forward in all things representation for the Mouse House and serves as an all right little action adventure film. Coming in at number 7, I have My Father's Dragon. Cartoon Saloon returns with another quaint little 2D hand drawn animated gem, though I do think My Father's Dragon may be the weakest from the studio yet. However, the weakest from Cartoon Saloon still turns out to be a pretty solid animated film overall. What they do so well is get down to the heart and the emotional resonance of the story and fable being told. Saloon nails it once again with My Father's Dragon. That emotional climax really hit. I thought it was beautifully done and a really great message for young kids about grief and how to handle change and grief. And although the story completely takes place on this magical island, it just really didn't have the same magical touch that the best from Cartoon Saloon has. Even other stories that take place in our real world that only have touches of the magic transport you into this wonderfully fantastical world. And that's where My Father's Dragon most came up short. The story is one of the more conventional from the studio, and without that added extra benefit of just transporting the viewer into this magical space, I think it came off as a fun, lovely little animated film, but it didn't quite have that special spark I was hoping for. Swimming in at number 6, I have The Sea Beast. Well, once again, we have a nice environmental message about animals, so I'm a sucker. I know. It put us off on the right fin right from the jump. Sea Beast actually was a bit of a surprise for me. Heading in, I thought it was going to be another one of those Netflix animated films with animation is not great and the story is just okay, but I actually found the animation to be quite beautiful in this film. The textures were amazing. The hair looked fantastic on all of our characters, and the character designs of all these different sea creatures was really fun. And yes, it is a very conventional story that we've seen done about a million times, particularly in animation with their environmental messages. But the heart was there, and our lead protagonist, this young girl standing up for her friend and the journey she goes on, was very heartfelt, sincere, and that's really what elevated this film. Not to mention Jake, our main character, voiced by Keith Urban, one of the hunkiest animated characters I've seen in quite some time. I'm just gonna say it. The adventure was fun. The messages came through in a really clever way. The animation was surprisingly gorgeous, really accomplished everything it set out to do very, very well. Color me surprised at how much I enjoyed this, but I had to put the Sea Beast all the way up here at number 6. So, kicking off our top 5 animated films of the year, I have Chippendale Rescue Rangers. This has to go down as one of the biggest surprises of 2022. I was not looking forward to Chippendale Rescue Rangers. This sounded like cringe-worthy mess to me, if I'm being honest. I was expecting some sort of Alvin and the Chipmunks mess when it came to this. Instead, I got a film dang near on par with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a spiritual sequel to that film, if you will. I had a blast with Chippendale. First of all, the animation is amazing. I love how animation is utilized here. Once again, we're taking the idea that Who Framed Roger Rabbit introduced and bringing it to the new age. So we have multiple different styles of animation integrated into the real world. The characters all look fantastic. We have jabs made at the 3D animation. They bring in characters like Ugly Sonic that are fantastic. The mystery is a whole lot of fun, and most of all, quite the opposite of those films low down on this list. It's hilarious. The film is so funny, it's self referential, it's hyper meta, and while everything doesn't land, which is going to always be the case when you throw this many jokes at the wall, so much of it does. And I found myself smiling and laughing and having a good time, literally from start all the way through to finish. Chippendale Rescue Rangers was honestly just one of the most fun viewing experiences I had in 2022, and that's why it had to make my personal top 5. Transforming its way into number 4, I have Turning Red. Pixar continues its run of very divisive films, and when it comes to Turning Red, I'm on the side that thinks it's pretty great. Yes, we are once again dealing with underrepresented groups and how we all face generational trauma. Woo! But Pixar brings this to life in a really inventive fashion, using this transformation into the red panda in such innovative ways. The allegory for womanhood blossoming and that transformation in life. as well as just the idea of coming into your own and being who you are. I thought it worked so well. Yes, I am a four townie for life after seeing Turning Red. This soundtrack was fire. I own it on vinyl, and I'm ready. Academy, can we get a nomination for Four Town at this year's Oscars so I can get a live performance? Please. Vocal work here was absolutely fantastic across the board. I actually loved May, our main character. She was really relatable on so many different fronts. And the emotional climax of this film between mother and daughter and herself in so many different ways, fantastic. Not to mention the absolutely wonderful depiction of teenage girl friendship was amazing, and some of the best depiction of young girl friendship I've seen put to screen. My boy Tyler, well, I don't think he quite got everything he deserved, but I live for him becoming one of the girls by the end of the film now. Okay, he's a four townie as well, and I love that he came into the group. While I do think it was a little bit cringe, I honestly think a lot of the cringe was actually intended. I think it was funny, it was heartfelt, it felt so personal. I had a great time with Turning Red. Coming in at number three, I have Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Now, I was never one that got fully on board with the Marcel train back in the day. When Marcel the Shell with Shoes On was that big internet sensation, I just kind of missed that whole phase. I remember it happening, but I was never one that was really involved with that. When they announced a film all this time later, I was like, what are we doing, Hollywood? What is going on with this? Color me shocked to get one of the most adorable and heartfelt, sweet films of the year. Jenny Slate is absolutely fantastic as Marcel once again, a role that truly lets her actually give a voice performance like any other she gives in her career. She is fantastic here. Animation is also wonderful. I actually didn't realize how much of it was sets build for the stop motion portions, but it's amazing. And they so seamlessly evolve from actual live action settings into these miniatures that were created around Marcel. It's amazing. Of course, it's the heart of the story, the true and genuine earnestness of Marcel, how adorable he is. Heart is why you're here. Like something like Paddington Bear. It's just sweet through its core, but never in such a way that turns you off with so much saccharine energy. The earnestness of it all makes it so that even cynical audiences, such as myself, fall in love with Marcel and are on board with their plight to find their family. It's also really funny. Marcel's hilarious. Their interaction with their environment is hilarious. And once again, it never has to make a ton of jokes. It's more of just a cute, earnest type of humor, but one that made me laugh and smile the entire runtime. Swashbuckling into the number two position, we have Puss in Boots, The Last Wish. So it was really difficult for me to decide between number two and number three, particularly as I think they are both fantastic for very different reasons. But I ultimately had to give the nod to Puss in Boots because I think it just does everything it wants really, really well at the end of the day. Once again, we're pushing the boundaries of animation with this insane style put to the screen. It's like this beautiful blend of the normal old school DreamWorks animation with Into the Spider-Verse style frame rates, 2D animation. It looks amazing. Action sequences oftentimes give you this like anime style of hyper stylized insanity, but it works with what the film is going for. It's also really funny. I laughed throughout the entirety of the movie. The vocal work from everyone involved is fantastic. The adventure itself is wonderful. And then to cap it all off, heart, the message, the mortality of it all is absolutely fantastic, and it chokes you up by the end because once again it's done with such sincerity and authenticity that so often goes missing in DreamWorks films, particularly. Care about Puss in this film and really feel for his adventure. This new little pedo, the little dog that's introduced Oh my gosh, color me shocked. I thought I was going to find him so annoying, and instead, he's the heart of the whole freaking thing. And I will say, we could have gotten rid of one of the villains who felt a little egregious in here. I think two villain plot lines was enough. We didn't need the third. And ultimately, I don't think his plot really added all that much to the story, but I can overlook it because I was having so much fun with everything else. And then finally, my number one, my favorite animated film of 2022 is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Now, while I loved so many of these films, at the top portion of my countdown, this was a no brainer at the end of the day. Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio was just something so special. I told you all already, I am a sucker for stop motion animation, and this film brought to life everything I adore about that art style. The story of Pinocchio, coupled with stop motion and the artistic style and storytelling of Guillermo del Toro, is literally a match made in heaven. And when brought to life, it was just as perfect as I imagined it would be. Disney, I have to say, even your classic, move to the side. This is my new favorite version of this fairy tale because it brings to light so many of the darker aspects of the story, of the fable that's being adapted here, and gives it a heart and a lesson quality that we've not yet seen before. The ending of this film gobsmacked me. It was so dang good. Now, Pinocchio is probably more of a brat here than we've ever seen it in any version prior, but it works because the ultimate transformation of the character feels really wonderful. And Geppetto's ultimate transformation as a character feels earned and authentic, giving us that really beautiful emotional payoff in the end. Musical numbers are fun, they're brief, they come in and leave with promptness. They give us just what we need, and then they exit stage left at an appropriate time. The character designs, oh my gosh, Guillermo brought in these wonderful native Mexican stylings, as he always does to his work, that looked fantastic with these sprites. The inventive nature of this world was awe-inspiring on the screen. The screenplay was fantastic. The original score was amazing. Literally, every single thing about Pinocchio worked for me. I adored this. Not only is it easily my favorite animated film of 2022, it is one of my favorite films across all genres and mediums for the year. That's why there was really no other option, no other choice, but Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio for my favorite animated film of 2022. So that was my ranking of all 18 animated films I watched in 2022. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so that you are always up to date on all of my latest videos. And make sure to check out the reviews and the several live reactions I did to films like Pinocchio, Turning Red, and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers right here on the channel. Also, make sure to share your own ranking of the animated films you saw in 2022, either in the comment section down below, or you can hit me up on Twitter. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.